President Trump, just a short time ago, hours ago, declared that in his view, the U.S. ceasefire with Iran is over after the two countries traded a barrage of new strikes in just the last 24 hours. Watch this.
Is the ceasefire done? Is the MOU dead?
It's a very interesting question. To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
The memorandum of understanding between the two countries apparently collapsing now as President Trump attends the NATO summit in Turkey. The president has also now reimposed sanctions on Iranian oil sales. That's a key reversal of a big concession that was part of the latest ceasefire, was part of this memorandum of understanding. Trump also called the negotiations with Iran a waste of time. Overnight, there were large explosions and fires seen at multiple ports in Iran. Those strikes are said to be the U.S. response to Iran launching a series of attacks on commercial ships near the Strait of Hormuz this week. Let's get to CNN's Kristen Holmes. She's live in Turkey for us following the president's travels. Kristen, what are you learning about this right now?
I mean, Kate, President Trump was incredibly angry. He was only meant to do some welcome remarks coming into NATO, and you saw him completely let loose. Part of what he seems to be angry about is this idea that the United States gave some space to the Iranians so that they would be attending the Supreme Leader's funeral, and then instead they were striking these commercial vessels. So now you have him saying that he believes the MOU is over, but he did leave the door open for potential negotiations, which is making a lot of this much murkier. Take a listen to what he said.
They want to negotiate. They're good people. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, but they have to come back to me. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a waste of time dealing with them. They're liars. They're bad people. And frankly, I don't want to waste my time with them.
And later he called them lying guys. He said they were a cancer that needed to be cut out. They were evil and sick. And you can just see this escalation from President Trump, who really has had this war in Iran hanging over most of his presidency now for much longer than he anticipated.
I want to bring in now Kurt Volker, former U.S. ambassador to NATO. Thank you so much for being here on what is now turning into an eventful day. The president saying that the ceasefire that they had negotiated, their memorandum of understanding, is over after some attacks on ships in the Strait of Hormuz. I want to play a bit for the president for you to hear, and then we'll talk on the other side.
They can talk, but I think they're wasting their time. Frankly, I don't want to waste my time with them. Now, I'll let our wonderful negotiators keep talking if they want, but I don't see it.
Okay, Ambassador, you know what it's like to have to keep talking. What does this mean for people who had been tasked with continuing this conversation?
Right. I think President Trump is just trying to ratchet up the visible frustration, try to put more pressure on the Iranians, see if he can get them back to a situation where they're not attacking anything. What happened is the Iranians attacked some vessels that were trying to go through the Omani side of the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians don't want that. They want them to go through Iranian waters where they can gradually establish a regime of control. Of course, we don't want that. But the problem is that we may want it or not want it, but if we are not prepared militarily, physically, to defeat the regime and prevent them from doing this sort of thing, this is where this is going to go. I don't think President Trump really wants to restart the war. He may get forced into it, but I don't think he really wants to. So he's trying to be tougher now to back up his negotiators to see whether he can get things back where they were with this MOU a few weeks ago.
Yeah, you were asked, I think just last night, about Greenland, and you said that Trump has a kind of routine. He complains, he criticizes, he says people aren't doing enough, and he keeps threats on the table. And I thought, gee, that's kind of applicable to this exact moment.
Yes, it is. That is the playbook here. He will do that, and he'll never concede anything. So even with Greenland, for example, I don't think he was planning to bring up Greenland at this summit at all, but somebody asked him about it. So he says, yes, of course it's still on the table. Of course it should be ours. And I think that is what he's going to do with the Iranians here, step by step. Keep putting the pressure on about the Strait, keep putting pressure on about the nuclear issue, try to get to something that he can actually live with, which is no fighting, so that oil prices and gasoline prices stay down.
If the ceasefire is over, does that mean Israel still has a kind of green light to continue its fight with Hezbollah in Lebanon?
Well, I think that's a very good point, because the Israelis will certainly take it that way. I think President Trump would like to feel that he's in the driver's seat. And so if Israel is going to attack or not, he would like to be the one who says so. But I think the Israelis are going to look at this and say, okay, if anything happens, if Hezbollah does anything at all, we have a green light. We feel free to go after them again now.
It's interesting that this NATO summit is happening in Ankara. People look at Turkey in a lot of ways as a sort of gateway between the East and the West, and it is at the center of this kind of Gordian knot of international issues, right? You've got Zelensky there trying to get support in its war against Russia. You've got Turkey asking the U.S. for access to F-35 fighter jets, kind of the most advanced fighter jets, and Israel saying, no, don't give it to them. It feels like the president actually, there's a lot of spinning plates here.
Yeah, well, there are. And just look at the geography. I mean, if you pull up a map, you've got the Black Sea, Ukraine, and Russia to the north. You've got Iran and Iraq to the east. You've got Syria and Lebanon to the south. Further down, you've got Israel on the other side of the Mediterranean. It is a region that has a lot of issues, and Turkey is a very large country, very capable country, militarily, economically, and they play a role in all of these issues that we care about. Most of the time, U.S. and Turkish interests are actually aligned, but there are a few cases where they diverge. And in all of these cases, it's really important that we are talking to the Turks and working with them, because it could go very badly if we don't.
And we should say, despite their requests, we're seeing reports, CNN reporting now that the Defense Secretary Hegseth has actually canceled his trip to Israel, where he was supposed to sort of soothe concerns about this potential sale. What are you going to be listening for now? Is it J.D. Vance that has to come out and say technical talks are still going? If the Iranians play nice, is it Hegseth? Kind of what are you expecting to see today?
Well, a couple of things. One of them, let's not forget, it's the NATO summit meeting. So I think it would be important for NATO to say something condemning the Iranian attacks on shipping and supporting freedom of navigation in the Persian Gulf. Very important that NATO stay aligned with the U.S. as we go through this, even if they're not contributing militarily, to show the direction that we want to go in. The second thing is, I think the Iranians are going to listen to President Trump and try to judge, is this just one more threat that he then winds down a couple of days from now, or is it going to be something different this time? They're going to be watching that. And in doing so, I think they're going to stand down on any attacks for a little while. They had, a quick one just recently, but I think they're going to stand down and see whether the U.S. really wants to escalate this or not. They're probably betting that we don't, and I think things will be quieter for a while.
With us now, CNN national security analyst Alex Plitzis. Alex, good to see you this morning. Look, the exchange of fire between the United States and Iran, the U.S. hitting targets, on the Iranian coast, the Iranians hitting inside Kuwait, inside Bahrain, the types of things we saw for several months but haven't really seen that much of the last month. What do you think this will do, if anything, to influence Iranian behavior?
So by itself, I don't think it has influenced Iranian behavior in the past, and that's the reason we saw a larger number of strikes yesterday. And that's because the Iranians had been hit back after they struck ships previously, and they continued to strike, as we saw more strikes yesterday. So the president ordered strikes in about 80 targets, as you just mentioned there, along the coast, really to degrade Iran's capabilities to strike ships. And in response, Iran struck 85 targets, or at least they claimed to have struck. There doesn't appear to have been any damage at our Ali Al-Saleem Air Force Base in Kuwait, and then the Fifth Fleet, our naval headquarters in the area in Bahrain. If you look at the numbers, it's largely proportional. The signal from the Iranians is it's proportional. We're not looking to escalate. But based on the president's comments this morning, he's extremely frustrated.
Look, and I will say this all has to do with controlling the traffic out of the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians firing on vessels that are going out there, the U.S. not liking that, Iran still wanting to control to a certain extent the traffic there. Alex, this is exactly what most critics of the MOU said was going to happen, that Iran was going to drag its feet, Iran was going to muck it up along the way. They're doing it. They're doing it. So what good is it? What would be enough to force the Iranians to change the way they behave?
Well, that's a good question, because at this point they believe that they are acting in good faith, in the sense that their version or understanding of the MOU is that they control the navigation of the Strait of Hormuz, and when ships do not obey their commands, they somehow have the right to fire on them. I was told by regional mediators after the last round of negotiations that went on pause for Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's funeral, that the Iranians were trying to impose their vision of that. And so it's clear that U.S. military strikes to date have been insufficient to dissuade the Iranians of that. So I'm not sure if more strikes are going to do it. The last time we got to this position, if you couldn't change the game, change the players. So it's unclear whether or not the president's going to take, more military action. We did decide to put the sanctions back on Iranian oil yesterday to hit them in the wallet, to try a different approach, because the Iranian economy is hurting. So we'll see if that measure has a little bit more influence.
And again, we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz, so we don't have the map here. They're showing the live traffic here, but I can show you this version of it here. This is a much closer version of it. Iran obviously wants the oil to get out. Iran wants to sell its own oil through the Strait of Hormuz, but control what other oil passes through here. And there has been some traffic, not up to what it was before the war, but there has been some traffic over the last few months, and I'm not sure it's going to stop completely. Given that there is this trickle of traffic, does the United States have what it wants in the Strait of Hormuz? Does it need to do much more other than just allow a few ships to pass every day?
Well, the problem is, if the Iranians continue to attack ships, it's going to dissuade the larger shipping companies from sending boats through, because the shipping company owners that I've spoken to said the red line is crew casualties. And unfortunately, the Iranians are still firing on ships, and they're actually hitting them, which is the real problem here. So, the strait has been quasi-open, still under duress from the Iranians. It hasn't been completely clear without strikes for any sustained period of time. And this really gets back to the Iranians needing cash. This is all about them looking to get tolls and fees and get their funds unfrozen, because the combination of the war, the sanctions, and the blockade are actually having an impact.